Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Data Doesn't Equal Outcomes podcast, hosted by CCNY. Behavioral health and human service organizations have to demonstrate outcomes. They have to run programs that make people better and prove it. And so the mad scramble for data is well underway. But data is just numbers, and outcomes are just results. Connecting the two is the work. So if it has to do with driving better results for clients using a data-driven approach, we cover it here on the Data Doesn't Equal Outcomes podcast. My guest today on the show is Gilbert Eijkelenboom. Am I saying that right?
Very correct.
Gilbert comes to us from Amsterdam. And before we jump in, Gilbert is the author of a fantastic book that I recommend for anybody in the data field or anybody that works with people in the data field. It's called People Skills for Analytical Thinkers. You can get it on Amazon or on his website, MindSpeaking. Gilbert, very nice to have you. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation with some pre-chats already. So glad we have finally have the chance to talk live.
Very good. So let's just kick it off with a little bit of your background so we can kind of set the stage for this.
Yeah, sure. So to explain my background in easy terms, I love data and I love psychology. And my academic background is in behavioral science, so more in the psychology field. But after I started a career in consulting in data analytics, and that's what I spent most of my career in. And I loved it, but also I noticed that only the data skills, only the technical skills is not enough. And I also needed more skills because more than once I presented my recommendations, my data to business people, and they did not adopt my recommendations. So I got quite frustrated and looking for ways to improve. And it was clear that communication skills and presentation skills are so important in the data field. And so important that I got more curious and I started to research more and try out new stuff. And I slowly grew into a trainer role. And I helped other people help with these communication skills. And I got so passionate that it got out of hand in a positive way, and eventually combined it to psychology and data in the company MindSpeaking that I founded.
Wonderful. So I want to tell a quick little story to kick us off. Those communication skills went to work about a year ago. You reached out to me on LinkedIn, cold connection, said, hey, it looks like we both work in data and quality. Let's get connected. And I'm happy to connect with most people who requested on LinkedIn. And the next thing I know, I'm seeing this book published. And the next thing I know after that, I bought it. The next thing I know after that, I gave it away. The next thing I know after that, I bought it again. Because I had to have my copy, but I couldn't dare take it back from the person that I gave it to. So the power of communication right there. And then here we are meeting face-to-face in a podcast. So I love telling that story. I tell it every chance I get. So
yeah, that's really cool. And I think it shows how much power there is in making these connections, even people that you don't know, reaching out to them and seeing what happens. And sometimes asking a question, see how you can help each other instead of just staying quiet and only reading and being passive.
Yeah, right.
That's such a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked a little bit about this beforehand, but, this podcast is really geared towards, health and human services, behavioral health care, mental health care, substance abuse, that type of work that's being done. And, the data piece for this industry is relatively new. And so a lot of people who are not as experienced in working with data, really smart people, it's just not their daily work, they're now being asked to look at a lot of data, and a lot of it's new. So data analysts are starting to bring reports in droves, right? What does that make you think of as a data analyst when, all right, I've got a whole bunch of people who are unfamiliar with data and I've got a lot of it and I need to deliver it to them? Where does your mind go when you think about that scenario?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, what knowledge level do they have? What mindset do they bring to the table? Because communication always starts with knowing yourself and knowing the people in front of you. And clearly those people in front of you, from the perspective of the data person, those people have different skills, different experiences. So yeah, we really need to adjust our communication and understand what they know and what they want to know, instead of just throwing what we know and what we like
Right.
to know.
I used to work delivering data to clinical folks, right? And I built this report once. It had probably 9 or 10 tabs of a visual analytics tool, and I deployed it, made it available, and I would ask them, "Hey, how's that report going?" They'd say, "Oh, it's great. We use it all the time." I said, "Awesome, awesome." And then I sat down with somebody once and I said, "Can you walk me through how you use it? I'd love to see what about it you're finding so useful." And the response to that I got was, "Oh, we only use the last page. We use it all the time, but we only use the last page." That's 10% of the work I delivered being used. And I was like, oh man, but the other stuff's really important. Like, where did I go wrong?
Yeah, it's such a story that many people recognize, right? And only if you connect to the people and ask them to walk you through the solution and how they want to use it and integrate it in their daily job, you get to know so much. You get to know so much valuable feedback that you can use. Yeah, I think it always starts with asking the right questions and understanding not just what people ask for, because many people, they ask for a solution, right? Can you make me can you create a dashboard with X, Y, Z? But often that's not really what they need. So you need to be able to challenge and say no if required, and dig deeper with questions to understand what they really need to deliver what they need and get to the business value.
So I love that concept, and I don't, there's nobody that would hear that and disagree with you, right? It's just sort of, when you lay it out, it makes good sense. Yet sometimes we're hesitant when we live in our data world to being able to actualize that and have those conversations. Like, what kind of tips or advice can you give to data professionals to make sure that they don't do what I did, right, and have 9/10 of their report go unused? How do you have those conversations? Right. How do you break down those walls?
Yeah, I think first of all, take a step back to understand why you haven't asked those questions in the past, because it could be for several reasons, right? First of all, maybe you're too passionate, too enthusiastic to dive into the data and go problem solving. That's what I see with many data professionals. Or maybe it's from a base of fear, where you don't want to challenge because you don't want to upset the relationship, or maybe the person is more senior. So first understand why you're not asking those questions, and then see how you can implement them. Because in your next conversation, it's very important that you use a framework that I named the 3 C's. So first you need to connect, clarity, curiosity, clarity. And what many people jump into the solution, right? Many data professionals are engineers. They like solving problems. So if you give them a problem, they dive into the data. But first, what is very useful is to connect with the person in front of you, saying, for example, hey, I see this request is important for you. I see these are your goals. So first, to validate the needs or validate the person in front of you instead of only talking about the content. So first, relate to the person one-on-one. Then curiosity, asking a lot of questions, mostly about the objective and the goal. Not only about the business goal, but also of that person in front of you, but also the other people that might be involved. So who are the other stakeholders that are involved? What are their goals? That's how you discover a lot of political interest of people that are not in the room. And after you ask all those questions, you end with clarity, summarizing what you've learned, the goals of that person, validating the needs, and then summing up what you're going to do and by when. And by using that very simple framework, connection, curiosity, clarity, you validate the other person, you keep a good relationship, while also focusing on the goals of what you need to achieve.
Yeah, it's almost it's almost funny, but you've just described like a really good model for a therapeutic relationship, right? Validating feelings, asking questions, and helping summarize is a pretty similar framework between like a therapist and a patient, right? So I think,
right, that's so true.
It's when I hear you frame it that way, it's almost this is going to sound a bit over the top, but you need to be a data professional and a therapist to your audience to help bring them along with your work so it doesn't hit them over the head or come across completely off.
Right. And you say it's overstated, and it probably is, but I think there's so much we can learn, because I never realized that, it's also like a therapeutic way. But I think we can learn so much from psychologists and counselors and how they approach such a conversation, right? The conversation is not about them, about the psychologist, but the conversation is about the person in front of them. And I think as data professionals, we're often approaching conversations in our own head instead of understanding the person in front of us. Yeah. So I think that's a perfect mindset to start every business conversation, because everything becomes easier if we take an empathy first mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I've been discovering lately, because I'm also a college professor, is that there's a lot of fear around data, in particular when it comes to performance metrics, right? People aren't comfortable when they get judged numerically. When somebody says to you verbally, "Hey, I think we could do better at that," most people react very positive. Okay, well, yeah, let's do better at that. When people say you're at 4 and need to be at 12, let's figure out how to get there, it becomes very scary. And what I've been noticing from my work as a teacher is, through university, we're sort of presented our performance data as final, right? You get a grade on your test and you don't take that test again. You get a grade on that class and you're done taking that class. But then we enter the professional world and it's much more fluid. You're going to take the same test over and over again and try to do the best you can always at that same, test, right? So it's a mind shift. It's a very different thing coming into the workforce and looking at data than the way our whole lives we've sort of been grown up to realize data is judgmental. It's final. It can't be changed. It can't be improved upon. Your grade is your grade. Your score is your score. So I think data professionals who then spend a lot of time getting comfortable with data and thinking about it as a means to improvement, there's a lot of power that they have and a lot of comfort that they can help deliver to those people who need to take the actions based on data. How do you react to that?
Yeah, I think it's a really cool way to look at it. And when I think about data and how targets are set, right? Sometimes people get targets imposed upon. And I really believe in empowerment, people that choose their own KPIs. I think in the end, and of course it needs to be in line with the company's KPIs, the goals of the company or the organization. But what is so important is that people have some accountability and they believe in the goals of the team and the individual themselves. So I really believe in having setting your goals yourself together with the people that are guiding you, and not imposing KPIs or targets on people. I think that gives so much freedom and motivation also to do better, instead of the data being pushed upon people, because it can be frightening. I agree. And
it just further creates that sort of friction or that divide.
Right. Well, how do you think we can avoid such that friction, or What are your thoughts on this?
Well, so I'm glad you asked that, because I want to transition, if it's okay, towards your concept of algorithms. I love how you are able to put this interpersonal thing in data terms, and I think a lot of people are going to resonate with that. But, I think about terms like creating safety and making somebody feel, when they're looking at data or setting goals, that a goal is a goal. But like, if you're obsessed with not failing instead of comfortably working towards achieving, that one mindset's detrimental, and that other one will get you above and beyond, your KPI. So I really believe that human beings do their best work when we're comfortable. We can push ourselves, but we can't be afraid. If we're in our fight or flight mode, we don't execute our best. And so, I had never, for a long time until recently, just really seen how much the data analyst who, let's face it, there's a stigma of data analysts run their numbers, deliver reports, and sit there and listen, right? There's kind of this like persona. And I just think it's not 100% true. And the ones who are best at it are handing over reports and explaining them and helping and coaching and understanding. And it's really just such a powerful seat in any business right now. You can can do your work, but then you have to sell it also. So
exactly. And I think making really easy, small adjustments to your work makes a big difference. For example, I know a lot of people that just deliver a report instead of explaining, going through it with a business person, with a end user, or giving a few recommendations. Not saying this is what you should do, but these are options. What I know from the data, you could explore this more, or this is a decision you could take. And that's how you guide people. You're more like of a consultant, a data consultant, instead of a simple service provider or operational support who just does what other people ask for. And I think getting to such a consulting role where you also have the communication skills, where you guide people about on the possibilities of data, that's where you become 10 times as valuable for end users.
Yeah. In the clinical terminology of solution-focused, trauma-informed care, one of the principles is trust. And creating that trustworthy relationship instead of a transactional relationship is really empowering. Absolutely. So we use another concept in our work here at CCNY with our evaluation process, and it's called utilization-focused review. And we basically approach our projects with the mindset that if the end result can't be used by the person it's for, it doesn't matter how good it is, right? If we could do the best analysis in the world that has the greatest insights in there, but if we turn it over to the client and they don't understand it or don't get it or don't know how to read it, if this happens, I should take this action. If they're not connecting with it, it's a waste of money. We might as well have not done the work at all, because it's just a bunch of pretty pictures at that point, right? So totally agree. How do you we talked about communication, but I love the way you describe like the tactics. Like, how can as data professionals break that box and make sure that end result is usable and not, on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, if you create a dashboard, something that has been very useful to me is not ask feedback, like what do you think about it? Because then people give opinions, what you should change or what you should improve. But just give people a dashboard or report and then tell them to think out loud. tell them to use it and think out loud. Okay, here I see in this column, I see the quantity of a product. Let me see, I will go down. So really think out loud and not give feedback or opinions or advice about the dashboard, but really make them use the dashboard and think out loud. This gives so much insight in how people use it. And this concept comes from, I did not invent this concept or this idea. I took it from UX, so user. It's from design thinking, and if you apply that to data, it works really well. So that's a simple concept that I like.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking back to the few times I've been asked to test a new piece of software, and that's exactly what they do. They just say, I'm not going to show it to you. Just try to use it and tell me what you're thinking. When you click, what are you looking for? What do you expect to find? What do you think you're going to see next? That's really good. I like that.
And I think I tried the same with my book as well, because I have a lot of illustrations. And for me, I thought about the illustrations for many hours. I drew them. I thought about it. So for me, everything was clear. But of course, for the reader, for someone without context, I need to make sure it's clear for them. Right. So I showed it to friends, to colleagues, to people in my professional network. And I was so tempted to show them the algorithm or the concept, one of the metaphors in my book, and tell them this is how it works. But I really needed to resist myself and show it to them and say, hey, can you tell me what you see? Walk me through it verbally. And that gave so much more insights instead of explaining it or asking for advice, what should change.
So I'm glad you brought us back to that, to the algorithms. Can you explain for us how you use that terminology and how data professionals can use that for, reflecting on themselves and then how they relate to others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I use algorithms as a metaphor for behavioral patterns, and how they are formed is as follows. Because you make a lot of decisions every day. Research says 35,000 decisions every day, remotely conscious. It's very hard to measure. It's really hard to research. But in any case, we're making a lot of decisions, whether it's taking an ice cream or an apple or whatever decision you want to make. And based on our experiences, we've learned how to make those decisions. So if you walk in, as a child, if you walk in the kitchen and you see an oven turned on, you might be enthusiastic because there's a light, right? So you might touch the oven, and then it hurts. But after you learn, okay, if the oven is on, maybe if the stove is turned on, I should not touch it. So it's a really easy kind of algorithm we built. So if I'm in the kitchen and the oven is turned on, then I should not touch it. So really if then expression. And we also have those for more complex algorithms that we learn later in life. So for example, if there's a new colleague joining in our team, then we make him or her feel welcome. It's very easy. It's something we learn along the way, either by punishment or reward. And slowly, this is also what we build in data. And many of the data professionals I already mentioned, if they are presented with a business problem, or if they are asked a question about the data, they jump into the data and go find the answer, instead of taking a step back and understanding what's the perspective of the other person, what do they actually want to learn from the data. So all these algorithms you've built, and whether you like it or not, they kind of run your life, and that's how you make decisions, because you cannot make all decisions consciously. And my point in the book is that by becoming more aware of these algorithms, positive and negative algorithms, you understand yourself better, and you understand how you behave in certain situations, and also how other people behave. And by understanding more about their algorithms, you can also, it's much easier to communicate with them because you know their perspective, their way of looking at the world.
Yeah, there's a common interaction that comes to mind when I hear you talk about that. And it's that moment where you've spent how much time and how much effort putting this thing together, right? And it's time for the big reveal. And the only thing you can possibly imagine hearing is, "That's perfect. I love it. I can't wait to use it," right? And what do you get instead? "I don't understand what this is, and I thought you were gonna give us something that did this." And like, so what's going on with our algorithms there, where we need to kind of check ourselves and make sure that we're reacting appropriately?
Yeah, I think if we hear that, we probably get triggered, right? If people criticize our work, or if say mean things or unfair things, however it feels for you in that situation, then we shut down, or then we defend ourselves, or then we criticize back, like say something like, "Yeah, the report you made last week was even worse." Some people respond in this way, and by understanding your algorithms and how you respond, and feeling how you respond in a situation, not immediately, just unconsciously doing whatever your algorithms are telling you, but taking a step back and seeing, hey, okay, they're not criticizing me, they're just saying that it's not helpful to them. So let's investigate what's happening here. Let's ask a question, and maybe say, hey, I'm quite surprised because before entering this meeting, I expected that these recommendations were very useful, but right now I hear they are not. So I would like to understand why they're not, so I can better help you. So that would be a much more productive way to respond, instead of blaming or becoming defensive or shutting down. And that's how this awareness of yourself, your own patterns, and other people's patterns can help you make better decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, nobody would say you shouldn't take pride in your work, right? And that's where a lot of it comes from. You're proud of the work that you did, and then, nobody wants to sort of be knocked down off of that. And, it makes me want to say that the report can't be the goal, right? If your goal as a data analyst is to make and deliver reports, then yeah, you can only feel criticized when you're not connecting. If your goal is for the company or the agency or the program to do better, and your reports are a tool to help do better, then it's really just about continuing your work towards that path, right? Reframing that what you do more about the final outcome versus the intermediary analytics that help you get there.
Exactly. And I think to get there, to focus more on the outcome, you need to understand the people in front of you, not just their personality, but also their goals. What are their goals they want to reach this year? It's a question I started asking last year to random people, or not random people, but professional contacts that I spoke to, and I asked them, what is your biggest goal of the next 6 months? And then the next question is, how can I help you reach it? And sometimes the answer was, no, you cannot really help, but thank you. And sometimes they said, hey, maybe you can give some feedback on this piece, or what do you think about this? Or maybe you can help promote that. And this is how really good collaborations happen. So I think by understanding more about the other person as a data professional, it's so rewarding. And also I created a maturity model for data professionals with 7 different pillars of soft skills and communication skills, mindsets, how people can grow. And one of those pillars is focus. And it's all about, are you focused on the solution, on the data, on the technicalities, improving the last 2% of your predictive model, or making a report really shiny or extensive? Or are you looking at what do end users need? What would help them? What do I need to do so that they have a more effective solution? And I think it's a big important area for data professionals.
Yeah.
How do you think people can become better at these these type of things, because for many people it's not natural. They are more focused on the data rather than the person and the goals of that other person. How do you think people can get better at that?
Yeah, I think that the institutions, the companies, the agencies, I think that culture can play a huge role in helping data professionals understand the goals of the people who are delivering the service better. So I'm going to use an example. In mental health outpatient treatment, there's a really important measure. It's an attendance measure, your show and no-show rates. And how often a client, this is true in healthcare, regular old physical health as well. If you schedule an appointment with your provider and you don't show up, then that's a negative, no call, no show, right? And that'll go down as a negative attendance number. And a certain amount of that happens naturally. It's okay for a client to not be able to make their appointment. But when they're not engaged enough to call and reschedule or call and let you know, when they're simply willing to just not show up, it's an indicator that that person's not connecting with their treatment in the first place. So for a data analyst, you can get stuck saying it's an attendance metric and we have to improve our attendance metrics. But what an agency, I think, has the responsibility to do is make sure that that data analyst knows that when clients have better attendance, they have better outcomes in that they become healthier, they become more independent, they become better functioning, they overcome the symptoms that brought them here in the first place. If you don't go to your therapy won't work, right? So I really think that as much as, we can talk about data professionals owning themselves in terms of these skills, and I do believe in that, I also think that organizations should familiarize themselves with concepts like yours and say, my data people deserve to know the end game. They deserve to know that this little piece of analytics or whatever it is they're tasked with, how does it fit in the big final picture? So the purpose. The purpose isn't the report. The purpose is better delivery of your end thing, whatever it is.
Yeah, I love the example. Because it makes so clear that, just one KPI or one number is influenced by and will influence other KPIs or numbers, and behind those numbers there's a lot of emotion often as well, especially in your field, right? So I think it's so important for data professionals to understand those relations, not just that number, but the bigger picture and those all other metrics, because then you also know how they influence each other, and because just knowing this number in isolation does not really contribute to anything. So thanks for giving that example.
And I think that if you ask, there's probably people around who can tell you. If you asked, if you're new to a role and you're working on an assignment and you asked somebody who's not, a data person, why is this important, or what is this? Right. Why do you need this? Like you said, going back to that good discovery before you just start running the numbers, right? Why are we doing this? You might actually do it differently if you understand that why. I think that's pretty
exactly
critical.
And I think this is something many data professionals need to learn, and also organizations need to embed, because I think a lot of organizations that want to grow with data and want to treat data as an asset, they focus a lot on technical skills, and many organizations have focused on technical skills. They need the most fancy data scientists, the most technical capabilities. They buy a lot of technical training for those people, but that will only narrow their mind more, right? Looking like technical skills is all there is, but yeah, I think we need much more to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit. There's the data professional world is very much abuzz with the concept of data storytelling. Everywhere you look on social media, in all the sort of clubhouses and places where data professionals get, you can't not see people talking about there's memes and videos and data is nothing if you can't tell a story. I don't know. What are your thoughts on data storytelling and how it fits into this whole puzzle?
I agree that data storytelling is very powerful. What I don't disagree with is, or what I do disagree with is that for many people, data storytelling is visualization. And for me, it's much, much more. And visualization is not even the most important stuff. For me, narrative is much more important because it always starts with your audience, and then it starts with a narrative, and then you look at what are interesting visualizations or suitable visualizations, because just visualizing data doesn't do anything, right? Okay, it makes it more easy to comprehend, to see trends, especially for people that are not as data literate. But what are you looking at? You can from one report you can visualize, you can make 1,000 of visualizations and then look at all of them. But what are you trying to achieve? I think it's much more effective if you first see, okay, what's the final result? What's the key insight I want to communicate? That's where you're going to build up to. And then what are the supporting insights? And make a story out of that. And I think we can learn a lot from people who live in Hollywood, movie makers, because they tell a story as well, right? And that's whatever your story you see in Hollywood, there's always one thing. There's always a problem and always tension. And one very simple storytelling framework that I like, there are many, of course, but some of them are very complex to explain right now in the podcast. But one I really like is the and, but, therefore framework. So it's a really easy framework to create a narrative. And how it goes like this. Because imagine you talk about your holidays. Imagine I talk about my holidays in Italy, and I say, I went to Italy, we had a great time, we had good food, great wine, and we rented a car and we drove around. But that story is not very interesting, right? The narrative is very boring, very flat, because it's just and. And how can we make it more interesting? By including tension, by including but. For example, by saying, I went on a holiday to Italy, I had good food, great wine, but on the fourth day, we got unlucky. We got a flat tire. And therefore, next time I'll rent a car, I'll check if there's a spare tire in the back. Is this a great story? Not really, but it's certainly much better because there's a bit of tension. And that's exactly what every story needs to have. And coming back to a data story, you can build up to the key insight, and then with it therefore give your recommendation. So what it could look like is, instead of saying, hey, the customer service waiting times are 40% up and the sales are down and the customer satisfaction is down. So and. But how you can also frame it is, the sales is 20% down and the customer loyalty is down as well. But what is most surprising is that the customer waiting times are 40% up. And therefore, I advise you to improve our FAQ page or to upskill customer service. So the therefore is the recommendation. And this is a much more powerful narrative because it has these insights that are building up to the key insight, the tension, and the recommendation. So that's why I love this framework. So to kind of conclude this answer, I think visualizations are overrated. Yes, they are important, but that's not only visualization is not data storytelling. You also need a narrative, and ideally you have characters as well. So talk about John, this loyal employee, or the person or the patient who's angry, who's frustrated. and who's going to leave or not show up because of the service we provide, because that will create change in the organization.
That just resonates real strong. I was actually an English literature major in college. Got into data much later. I came the other way. Instead of learning data and then learning how to tell stories with it, I've always been a storyteller. And then I felt like I needed data in my stories. So then I, pursued skills down that arena.
Right. So you took the other way.
It's a difficult detour. I'm not going to lie. I really like that. But therefore,
it's actually a framework by Randy Olson. So he's a marine biologist. He did a PhD, but then he moved to Hollywood because he wanted to, make movies and have this creative side. And this is how he combined the two.
Yeah, that's cool. A great perspective on data storytelling. The other concept that I want to mention and get your thoughts on is when I start teaching my class, it's a writing class, and before I do a single piece of instruction, the first thing I tell everybody is everybody's in sales, whether you like it or not. Everybody will have to sell something at some point. And the reason I know that is you will at least have to interview for a job where you need to sell somebody on buying you with their money to be your employee. But we sell ideas, we sell thoughts, we sell much more than products, right? And data professionals, they have to sell usage, sell adoption, sell change recommendation. I mean, there's a lot that has to get sold. What are your thoughts on the concept of sales being applied to data? It's not something it's happening lately, but historically, those two professions have been kept so far apart. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I like that you bring this up because I do see the same. And I think the reason why these are so far apart is because many people in data have a different personality compared to people in sales, right? People in data are very skeptical, cautious, and always data driven, right? They don't want to say things that might be wrong. I'm generalizing, of course. And people in sales are a bit more optimistic and let's do this, and a bit maybe overconfident in some cases because they're also driven by their own targets. And I think this is why historically they're far apart. But I think they're coming closer more and more because we, as data professionals, we can learn so much from salespeople because they're great storytellers and they're able to, with just a few insights, make to understand what people in front of them need, what they want. The best salespeople can ask really good questions, so they have all the qualities we talked about in this conversation. That's why we can learn so much, and we constantly need to sell, like you say, adoption. We need to sell our insights and recommendations and tell other people why they matter to them. But if we don't know what matters to them, then it's going to be a hard one. And I think that there's one book, To Sell is Human, by forgot the author, maybe you know, but it's a
good title.
It's a really good book. Yeah, and I like the title as well because it shows, like you say, where everyone is in sales, right? So we need to abolish this misconception or this perception of sales that it's dirty, and instead adopt it and see what we can learn from it.
Yeah, and I think that's they're coming closer together, but it's not just data coming closer to sales. And I think that's a message that I would try to relay to a data professional struggling with this is people in sales are becoming more data-driven in what they do. They're becoming more reliant on analytics. I need to see some analytics to help me decide how I sell next or where I sell next or how I, so it's not simply, data people migrating towards sales to learn from them. Sales are becoming more reliant on data. So I would say it is actually starting to meet in the middle. So to want to learn from sales, they want to learn from data too. So the needle's moving both ways towards the middle.
Absolutely. And I think this is something that not all data professionals see. They have this perception that, why should we move closer to them, right? Why don't they come to our side? But I think many people are willing to learn a bit more. And yes, maybe more people need to be willing to learn the technical side and learn more about data and not say, that's not my work. The data guys do that. But it only works if you move both, right? You cannot just blame the other side for not coming closer. You need to take initiative. I agree.
Very much. Well, that's everything that I wanted to cover today. I do just want to mention again, or maybe Gilbert, I'll give you a chance to mention, where can people find your book, People Skills for Analytical Thinkers?
Yeah, easiest place is on Amazon. Of course, there's a lot of Amazon places over the world. On MindSpeaking.com, you can find a lot of links to your local Amazon place. And yeah, on that website, you can also find more about my trainings. I do a lot of company trainings where I help data scientists, data analysts to communicate better. So to tell stories with data, to understand end users. So that's what I'm very passionate about. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I post regularly. So feel free to connect. And who knows, maybe we have a podcast conversation in 6 months.
Yep, absolutely. All right. That's a wrap for today. Gilbert, thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris.